Hey there folks, the number one Denzel Curry fan from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Denzel Curry record, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2. Denzel Curry is arguably one of the most consistently great rappers active today. After all, the man's discography feels remarkably impenetrable for a guy who's been on a lot of people's radar for a decade or so at this point, give or take, and active well before that as well. I mean, whether you prefer the aggressive trap southern sounds of his earlier material or the more versatile experimentations of his 2022 magnum opus Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, there's likely to be at least one or 2 points in Denzel Curry's discography, his overall body of work, that will strike a chord with you as long as you are invested in rap as a genre in general, in one way or another. And now here we are with his latest studio album, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2. King of the Mischievous South Volume 2, a sequel to the original King of the Mischievous South mixtape all the way back in 2012, a full 12 years ago at this point, could be seen as a definite return for Denzel to his southern roots, so to speak. I mean, while that may be disappointing for some, I think that the final result is an example of how Curry's reliable high standards are still here, despite the fact that he's been repeatedly setting them for himself for well over a decade at this point, and has been non-stop matching it ever since then, including with this record. And I mean, hey, I won't lie, for those who initially fell in love or just were outright exposed to Denzel's music for the first time back in 2022 with the aforementioned Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, the more southern-oriented sound of King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 may be somewhat unappealing. Not that the aforementioned album didn't have that or anything like that, but this is a more dirty South-oriented kind of record based around a huge amount of the influences that Curry was brought up on and was heavily partaking in throughout the first few albums that really saw him break through into the semi-mainstream. I mean, really, his roots can be traced back to the more grimy side of the southern rap scene at large, and that can be found in everything from his early mixtapes to those aforementioned breakthrough records like 2016's Imperial and 2018's Taboo, for example, the former especially having a lot of those influences being directly woven into his own unique take on things. And in that sense, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2, it kind of feels like a deeply heartfelt tribute to the sounds that brought him up in his younger years and have eventually brought him to the modern day, his present state as one of the most critically and even commercially beloved rappers active in the world today. And honestly, as a full experience, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 succeeds in being this sort of auditory journey through various forms of southern rap that I ultimately kind of feel like this is a really impressive nod towards the kind of sounds and styles that influenced Curry to begin making music in the first place. Various forms of different southern rap subgenres, different movements that influenced him throughout his upbringing, throughout his early years as a rapper especially, again, up until the point that he's at today. And it feels genuinely impressive how he manages to cover a fair amount of ground stylistically while sticking to a consistent flow in terms of the album's overall structure. Songs like Black Flag Freestyle with That Mexican OT work with a more traditional Memphis rap kind of sound that will be familiar to a lot of people invested within that particular corner within United States' examples of notable rap of the late 90s and early 2000s, while other cuts such as the Ski Mask the Slump God collaboration, Hit the Floor, kind of wind up being a bit more modernized, a bit more of a somewhat industrial take on similar sounds, ultimately allowing this record to simultaneously feel like a tribute in the most literal sense to a much older form of southern rap, while at the same time being a modernized version of it that's meant to sort of be a continuation of the sounds that make Curry the artist that he is. Even with the variety of sounds from track to track, each individual song has its own respective unique identity and is easily identifiable from one song to the next, thus allowing King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 to definitely feel like, again, more of a journey through various different corners of southern rap rather than a nod towards one particular scene, one particular subgenre, or one particular group or artist. And in that sense, I think it's really nice to feel the variety that's found here, while again at the same time staying fairly rooted within the same space geographically. It makes for a really brilliant tribute to a very specific yet at the same time extremely broad group of rappers in the United States. At the end of the day, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2, it takes the initially disappointing concept of stepping away from the new and promising creative avenues of his previous record to take a journey back to his roots through his influences and enshrine those influences in a way that feels extremely heartfelt, extremely genuine, and at the same time Curry has enough fun with it that it doesn't feel like some sort of overdramatic record that's meant to move you in some way. It really is just a genuinely excellent tribute to a specific area within the world that means obviously more than anything else within musical influences, at least, to Denzel Curry. It's always a nice thing to see major artists like him nodding towards his influences, potentially attracting more people to listen to those influences, and honestly, between how direct he is about it throughout this record, as well as the overall high quality of this record, I really do hope that a lot of people find themselves being steered towards some of the sounds, some of the artists, some of the scenes that have led Denzel Curry to being the rapper that he is today. I honestly think that, again, this is a really genuinely excellent tribute. Denzel himself sounds great here as well, though I don't really think that's a total shock to anybody that's at least remotely familiar with his discography at large. I mean, as I stated, this record is far from the first time that Curry has worked with these southern sounds and influences, a lot of these trap influences and beats, and it's not surprising in turn when he succeeds greatly on the instrumentals to songs like G's Up, for example. And King of the Mischievous South Volume 2's general quality in regards to Curry's performance work is generally in line with his previous releases, in that they kind of just fall more in line with the dirty South sound than his latest often does. Yet at the same time, he never ever really sacrifices any of the overall energy, any of the overall passion that has been so key in making him such a beloved figure within the modern rap scene at large. His flows are tight, his lyrical game is strong, he has some extremely powerful performances here, yet at the same time he also proves he can craft a punchy and memorable verse that nonetheless doesn't drop off quality-wise in terms of production or anything like that, thanks to some great beat selection on this record. It kind of all allows for Curry himself to shine the most, which is saying something when you have a lot of other extremely talented artists featured on this record, which is something I'll bring up in a moment, but I digress. Denzel's performance throughout this record on King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 is unlikely to shock anyone who has heard his previous works that are more in this lane, so basically anybody who has heard a record by him that isn't Melt My Eyes, See Your Future. Yeah, at the same time, with that being said, it feels hard to complain when said performances are of equally high quality. This does not feel like a watered-down version of a record like Imperial in terms of Curry's overall performances. It feels like it's equal, and it also, again, feels like a record that is very much current Denzel Curry paying tribute to the sounds that brought him up to this point in the first place. There are a number of genuinely great features on this record as well, which is really nice to see when you have a track list like this that is absolutely stacked with features. I mean, literally every single track here, nothing but features, so it's nice to see all of them being consistently great across the board, never really dropping off in quality for one lesser artist or anything like that. I would argue, however, that the most exciting and interesting appearances come from the legendary American Southern rappers that appear on this record that likely influenced Curry, as well as many other artists active in music in general today. It's nice to see cats that were active decades ago proving that they still have it and are just as capable of delivering excellent work as the younger generations that they ultimately ended up influencing. I'm talking about artists like Project Pat on Sked, Juicy J on Cole Pimp, and Kingpin Skinny Pimp's various appearances throughout all of the different interludes on this record. It's really nice to see Curry himself not only pay tribute to those artists, but also involve them in this record in a way that is not only a great demonstration of their talents, but will also most likely direct a lot of younger fans listening to Curry to records by people like Project Pat, by 3 6 Mafia, etc., etc. It's a really nice thing to see. While having legends of Southern rap appear on a record that is already inherently kind of a tribute to them and the sound that they've helped build over the years, the more contemporary rappers that are featured on this record are also pretty great as well. Armani White delivers a shockingly great verse on Wish List. ASAP Ferg and Rocky appear on Hot One and Hoodlumz respectively, both bringing some solid work to the table, and Maxo Cream's appearance on Set It is a solid reminder as to why he was and still kind of is one of the most heavily hyped up Southern rappers ever since he really first came onto people's radar in the late 2010s. There really isn't a weak point here in terms of features, both the old and the new, and that's something that's really nice to be able to say about this album. King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 is a really nice mixture of classic and contemporary, so in turn it ultimately adds to the general theme of paying tribute to the sounds that influenced Curry, as well as multiple artists that appear on this album. I really do feel like hearing these classic legendary rappers on this album is great to see from the perspective of them getting to shine decades into their career, and having the more young artists that are on this record appearing and doing their thing, the more recently debuted artists, is great as well, as it shows the impact that this sound has had on rap at large for decades at this point. But more importantly than influence or what it means to have all of these different rappers on an album that pays tribute to the Dirty South, I feel most importantly is that all the features are just genuinely really good. I don't have complaints about any single feature here. Obviously, like anyone else, I do have my personal favorites, which are the ones that I've pointed out here in this video, but that is just a matter of personal taste as far as my personally preferred rappers go. Generally speaking, I don't think that there's a single verse or appearance on this record that stands out as weaker than the rest, and that's a pretty shocking thing to say when you have countless features on an album that's pretty damn short. As a whole, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2, it acts as an excellent return to roots for Denzel Curry, as well as a beyond welcome tribute to various subgenres and eras of rap from the United States' South. And with those looking for Curry to kind of take his sound in entirely new directions, they will probably be disappointed by this, I will not lie. But with that in mind, I really do think that the reliance on retread sounds here, I think that it doesn't really matter. The pure love and energy that he's putting into this record and the pure passion that he has for paying homage to the sounds that he does here, it makes it feel like this record is absolutely undeniable in continuing the consistent level of quality that Curry has had going for him for well over a decade at this point. And it certainly helps that there aren't any misses here in particular between all of the great features, the excellent production, the pacing of the album, and Curry himself. Even the overall runtime of 35 minutes. That's a pretty perfect runtime for a record like this in terms of managing to convey all of the ideas that it has and wants to do, managing to pay tribute and respects to all of the artists that it's trying to pay respect towards, yet not overstaying its welcome. I genuinely really have no complaints about this record whatsoever. While this may not be the best Denzel Curry album to date, and that's saying a lot considering that the guy kind of doesn't really have a bad record at this point, and 2 years ago he just came off of a pretty career-defining album overall. This is an album that manages to prove that he is capable of continuing his streak of great successes, even when returning to familiar sounds, and in turn, King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 acts as not only a great follow-up to the original mixtape, but just a great record in general. I'm going to give this record 4 stars out of 5. With that being said, that is the end of this album review. Thank you for watching The Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.